Western Front, France, July 19, 1916. At Fromelles, 5,533 Australian soldiers vanished in a single blood-soaked night, their bodies devoured by mud so ravenous it still hasn't finished digesting them a century later. From the depths of my collection, the War Maestro brings you a tale where the earth hungers, the dead refuse to rest, and the living are merely guests at the harvest. The Great War had devoured millions by summer 1916, its Western Front a festering wound stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. The Battle of Fromelles was meant as a feint to draw enemy attention from the Somme. Instead, it became butchery. In just 24 hours, the Australian 5th Division lost over 5,500 men, their first major engagement becoming one of the war's bloodiest failures. 3 days after the slaughter, Sapper William Billy Corbett stood in a fresh communications trench, mud caked to his uniform in glistening layers that smelled of rot and cordite. At 26, the former undertaker's apprentice from Melbourne had earned a macabre nickname, Billy the Boxman, for retrieving fallen comrades with mortician's precision while shells exploded around him. "Christ, another piece," muttered Private Denham, a wiry farm boy whose once innocent eyes now held the vacant stare of men who'd seen too much. His shovel struck something solid in the mud wall. "Yours or ours this time?" "Let me see," Billy said, scraping away clumps of mud that clung to his fingers like hungry mouths. He uncovered not flesh, but splintered timber. "It's framing. Enemy construction." Lieutenant Hayes pushed forward, his once immaculate uniform now as mud-caked as his men's. Unlike most officers, Hayes shared trenches with his sappers, earning reluctant respect. Intelligence mentioned they built deep here. Investigate. As they cleared more mud, a hatch emerged, perfectly sealed despite the churned battlefield above. Billy traced the edge with professional interest, ignoring the way the soil seemed to pulse against his fingertips. "Masks ready," Hayes ordered. "Could be gas." When they finally pried it open, stale air escaped with a prolonged hiss, like a dying man's final breath. Billy descended first, lantern held before him. The bunker was unnaturally dry despite the sodden earth above, and there they sat, 7 enemy soldiers in perfect formation, backs straight against the wall, rifles resting on knees. Billy approached the nearest soldier, Undertaker's instinct overriding military caution. The man's skin remained intact, not decomposed as it should be after days in summer heat. His eyes, sunken yet clear, stared forward with terrible alertness. "They look preserved," Denham whispered, keeping his distance. Even battlefield-hardened men recognized wrongness when they saw it. "Not preserved," Billy corrected, studying them with professional detachment. "Waiting." On a field desk lay a logbook, the final entry, translated by their linguist. "If we do not rot, we must still serve." That night, Billy's dreams filled with standing funerals, enemy soldiers in perfect formation saluting him. He woke, choking on soil that hadn't been in his mouth when he fell asleep, earth packed beneath his fingernails though he'd scrubbed them clean before bed. "The dead don't move," he reminded himself. "The dead stay put." But as he wiped mud from his lips, Billy couldn't shake the feeling that something in that bunker had recognized him. One undertaker to another. Night fell over Pheasant Wood like a burial shroud. The artillery had ceased, leaving an unnatural silence broken only by distant moans of the wounded. Orders came to seal the bunker until command determined what to do with the preserved enemy soldiers. Billy sat alone on his bunk, pencil scratching against paper. Not a letter home, but notes in his journal. "Writing to your girl?" Denham asked, scraping mud from his boots with methodical fury, as if the soil itself had personally wronged him. Professional observations, Billy replied. The truth was stranger. Since his apprenticeship days, Billy maintained one-sided conversations with the dead through his journal. Not prayers, but undertaker's musings. Tonight, he found himself addressing the enemy soldiers directly. How do you maintain such discipline even in death? The mortician in me admires your posture. Sleep came in fragments. The dugout creaked under the weight of earth above, timbers whispering with each shift of soil. In dreams, Billy stood before perfectly aligned enemy graves, each corpse rising to attention at his approach. He woke gasping, mouth packed with soil that tasted of chemical preservatives, fingernails rimmed with dirt, though he'd cleaned them before sleep. A scream tore through pre-dawn darkness. Denham thrashed violently in his bunk, eyes wide with animal terror. Hayes and two others pinned him down as he fought against invisible restraints. "They're down there," Denham gasped, chest heaving. Unlike the vacant-eyed farm boy of yesterday, something terrible now lived behind his gaze. Whispering, "Christ, I heard them talking." "Just a nightmare," Hayes said firmly, though doubt shadowed his face. Denham's wild eyes found Billy. "They're not dead," he hissed, voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "They're listening. All the time, they're listening." The men exchanged uneasy glances before returning to their bunks. Billy remained seated, tasting soil on his tongue. When he opened his journal to record Denham's episode, he discovered unfamiliar handwriting amid his own entries, rigid and precise like the enemy officer's logbook. The living always forget their place. Billy stared at the words, a chill spreading through him. He hadn't written this, yet there it was in ink, not his usual pencil. Morning revealed another unsettling development. The bunker hatch, officially sealed with wooden planks and nails, stood open. The planks were stacked with military precision beside it, nails arranged in neat rows like soldiers on parade. As Billy knelt beside the open hatch, the silence from below felt expectant, like held breath, like men awaiting inspection. "I know you're listening," he whispered, surprising himself. Rising, he noticed fresh boot prints in the mud, leading from the bunker toward their dugout. The print pattern matched no Allied-issue boot. That night, as exhausted men sought sleep, Billy heard it, measured footsteps beneath the floorboards, pacing, patient, precise. The watch had begun. By the fifth day, men avoided the section near the bunker, crossing themselves when assignments took them past it. Only Billy seemed drawn to it, volunteering for watch duty where others invented excuses. The bunker had been resealed twice, with increasingly heavy measures. Each dawn revealed it, meticulously reopened, fastenings arranged with parade ground precision beside the hatch. The unit's youngest, Private Cooper, a bookish boy with wire-rimmed glasses who'd lied about his age to enlist, had begun humming in his sleep, a methodical melody none recognized, rising and falling like distant artillery fire. "I don't speak their language," Cooper insisted when confronted, eyes darting nervously. "Never have." "Shell shock affects men differently," Hayes offered, though uncertainty colored his voice. Later, Cooper approached Billy alone, nervously polishing his glasses with a handkerchief already stained with mud despite repeated washing. "Boxman," he whispered, using Billy's nickname. "Is it true you talk to them?" Billy tensed. "To who?" "The ones we can't bury properly," Cooper replied, replacing his glasses with trembling hands. "The ones who keep digging themselves out." Artillery fire interrupted, whistling shells walking across no man's land. The thunder of explosions sent men diving for cover. One detonated close enough to collapse part of the trench wall near the bunker. When the barrage lifted, Billy found himself alone in the damaged section. The shell had exposed a cross-section of the battlefield strata, a grotesque geological record. Uniform fragments, a boot with foot still inside, identification tags gleaming dully in compacted earth. Fromelles dead, layered like sediment. Then movement caught his eye, a finger, slowly curling and uncurling, protruding from the mud wall as naturally as a worm after rain. Without thinking, Billy reached for it. The finger was cold but not stiff, gripping his with terrible strength. From deeper within, an eye opened, bloodshot but alert, fixed on him with unmistakable recognition. Billy wrenched free, stumbling backward. The eye blinked once before collapsing mud sealed it away, but the finger remained visible, pointing directly at the bunker. That night, Billy wrote feverishly in his journal, "The earth here doesn't claim the dead. It preserves them, not as corpses, but as sentries. What are they guarding?" Dawn revealed new horror. 3 pages had been torn from his journal, replaced with pages from the enemy officer's logbook. The handwriting alternated between Billy's informal scrawl and the officer's precise lettering, creating a dialogue neither man had consciously written. "How long must we stand watch?" in the officer's hand. "Until properly relieved," in Billy's own writing, though he had no memory of it. "We await your orders, Undertaker." The final entry chilled him most, his handwriting but not his conscious thought. The mud nourishes. The mud preserves. The mud recruits. Billy looked up to find Denham's bunk empty, blanket folded with military precision. His boots remained, placed neatly beside the bed, both filled to the brim with wet, fresh soil, though no rain had fallen for days. The search party found no trace of him, except for those soil-filled boots and a single set of footprints leading toward the bunker, disappearing mid-stride, as if their owner had been plucked from the earth itself. That evening, Hayes pulled Billy aside, voice low. "Command's sending a medical officer to examine those bodies. Something's not right here, Corbett. Men don't just disappear." But Billy knew better. Men disappeared constantly in this war. The difference was that these men weren't staying gone. Denham's disappearance cast a pall over the unit. Officers attributed it to shell shock, suggesting he'd wandered into no man's land in a state of confusion. Billy knew better. The soil in Denham's boots wasn't the churned mud of the battlefield, but clean, mineral-rich earth from deeper strata, the same soil he had coughed up after his dreams. Lieutenant Hayes had ordered a wider berth around the bunker, posting warnings of potential gas pockets. The men needed little encouragement to avoid the area, all except Billy, drawn to it like a mourner to a grave. On the 7th night after the discovery, he sat alone in a quiet corner of the trench, the enemy officer's logbook open beside his own journal. He had begun answering the dead man's entries, creating a conversation across time and battle lines. At first, it had been professional curiosity, one keeper of the dead to another, but it had evolved into something more intimate. The officer's entries detailed failed evacuation attempts, gas exposure, isolation. The final pages documented a strange acceptance, peace found in standing eternal watch. Billy found himself responding, "Your men maintain perfect posture. Is that training or something else? The dead I've known before always succumb to gravity." He waited, pencil hovering. Before his eyes, marks formed, not written by his hand, but appearing as if pressed from beneath the page. The living always forget their place. Lying down is surrender. Standing is service. Billy stared, heart pounding against his ribs like artillery against a trench wall. He was witnessing something impossible, yet it felt more real than the war raging above them. He wrote, "What service requires such devotion beyond death?" The answer came slower, letters forming with deliberate precision. The same that calls to you, undertaker, the harvesting of the fallen. Cold sweat beaded on Billy's forehead. He closed the journal, tucking it inside his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Whatever communication had opened between him and the dead officer, it vibrated with terrible purpose. At morning briefing, Hayes announced brigade headquarters had ordered the bunker collapsed and the trench rerouted. Demolition experts arrive tomorrow, Hayes explained, not meeting Billy's eyes. Seems command doesn't like having enemy dead preserved under our lines. Bad for morale. Relief washed over the men's faces. Only Billy felt inexplicable dread rising like floodwater. That afternoon, Cooper approached him again, his once scholarly eyes now vacant as a battlefield crater. I hear them at night, he confessed, glancing around nervously. They talk about you. What do they say? Billy asked, mouth dessert dry. That you understand their purpose, that you're to be their new officer, since yours have abandoned you to the mud. Cooper leaned closer, breath smelling of earth and chemicals. Last night, they called you by name, not Boxman or Corbett. They called you Undertaker. A chill ran through Billy, the same word used in his journal exchange. I found this in my boot this morning. Cooper pressed something into Billy's palm, a military identification tag caked with dried mud. Wiping it clean revealed Denham's name. I told you, Cooper insisted, voice hollow. They left a message. The sentry must be relieved by proper authority. The watch cannot be abandoned. That night, Billy dreamed he stood in formation with the 7 enemy soldiers, their uniforms different, but their posture identical. In the dream, they presented arms to shadowy figures emerging from the mud walls. Australian soldiers from the Fromelles assault, moving with perfect discipline despite their wounds. He woke standing before the bunker hatch, no memory of having left his bunk. The hatch stood open, inviting. From below came the sound of steady breathing, the measured respiration of soldiers at attention. I know, Billy whispered, the words forming without conscious thought. I'll cover your post. The demolition team arrived at dawn, 3 sappers with explosives and haunted eyes. Billy watched them lay charges around the bunker entrance, fighting an irrational urge to intervene. Hayes stood beside him, documenting the procedure with mechanical precision. Strange business, that bunker, Hayes remarked, voice low. I've seen death in every form out here, but those men, they didn't look dead, did they? Billy remained silent, fingers tracing his journal through his shirt pocket. The demolition leader gave the all clear, and the men retreated. The fuse was lit. Nothing happened. They tried again with a new fuse. Again, nothing. The 3rd attempt failed just as mysteriously, the fuse burning steadily until reaching the entrance, then extinguishing as if pinched by invisible fingers. Some kind of gas pocket must be preventing detonation, the demolition sergeant explained, doubt shadowing his face. We'll need to vent the area first. As the team packed up, Billy approached the hatch. It remained partially open, a sliver of darkness visible beneath. He knelt, ostensibly to examine the failed fuse, but really to whisper words that rose unbidden to his lips. You don't bury sentries, he murmured, not while they're still posted. The air from the opening brushed his face, cool, dry, carrying that same chemical preservative scent. For a moment, Billy thought he heard a whispered response, like many voices speaking in perfect unison. That evening, orders arrived to halt the demolition. Brigade headquarters was dispatching a medical officer to examine the preserved bodies. Potential intelligence value, the communiqué stated. Cooper disappeared during dinner, his rations left untouched. A search found no trace of him. though his helmet was discovered carefully placed beside the bunker hatch, filled with fresh earth like a flower pot. Billy volunteered for night watch, positioning himself near the bunker. The moon cast hard shadows across no man's land, illuminating shell craters where Australian dead still lay unrecovered. In his journal, he sketched the landscape, noting how the moonlight seemed to reveal figures moving through the mud, not bodies being retrieved, but soldiers standing upright, advancing with military precision toward Allied lines. Near midnight, he heard scraping from inside the bunker. The hatch swung open of its own accord. Steeling himself, Billy shone his torch down into the opening. The 7 enemy soldiers remained in position, but their arrangement had changed. One now stood directly below the ladder, facing upward, at parade rest. The darkness obscured most details, but Billy could clearly see the soldier's face, or what remained of it. One eye socket was empty, meticulously packed with soil like a planter. The standing soldier's remaining eye fixed on Billy with terrible recognition. "What do you want from me?" Billy whispered. No verbal answer came, but the seated soldiers shifted in unison, each turning slightly to reveal objects in their laps. Not rifles as he'd first thought, but tools, entrenching shovels, trowels, specimen jars filled with soil. The harvesting of the fallen. Billy understood then. These weren't just preserved corpses. They were collectors, gatherers of the dead, ensuring none were lost to the mud. Their vigil hadn't ended with death because their duty transcended it. And now they recognized in him a kindred spirit, another who tended the dead with professional care. He reached into his pocket, retrieving his journal and the officer's logbook, now bound together with field twine. Wrapping them in his waterproof oilskin pouch, he knelt at the bunker's edge. "I'll cover your post," he said, the words feeling like an oath. "I'll keep them off the wire." He placed the bundled journals inside the hatch, watching as the standing soldier's mud-caked hand reached up to accept them. The touch of those preserved fingers against his own sent a jolt through Billy, not revulsion, but recognition, a transfer of duty. Above them, the night sky illuminated with sudden, brilliant flashes. Artillery fire erupted without warning, shells targeting their section. Billy dove for cover as the world became noise and pressure and chaos. Scene 6. The Quiet Watch. The artillery barrage transformed their section of the line into a churned nightmare of collapsed trenches and broken bodies. When silence finally returned, Billy found himself alive in a shallow depression, ears ringing. The bunker entrance had vanished, buried under tons of displaced earth. Of the original 23 men in Billy's unit, only 11 survived. Lieutenant Hayes moved among them, taking roll call with mechanical precision, his right arm hanging useless at his side, dark blood seeping through his sleeve. "Cooper?" he called. Silence. "Still missing," someone noted. "Denham?" More silence. "Corbett?" "Present," Billy answered, his voice sounding distant even to himself. He clawed at the ground where the bunker hatch had been, fingers bleeding as they scraped against stones and shrapnel. It was gone. They were gone. And with them, his journals, the record of his transformation. But as he knelt in the ruined earth, his fingers closed around something solid, a small, precise tool unlike his standard issue equipment, an undertaker's trowel for grave preparation. That night, as the survivors huddled in a hastily reinforced dugout, rain began to fall, turning the battlefield into a quagmire. Water seeped through their shelter's roof, bringing with it fine particles of soil raining down, the same rich loam he'd found in Denham's boots. "Medical officer arrives tomorrow," Hayes announced, passing around the rum ration with his good arm. "Though what he'll examine now, I can't say." Billy remained silent, the trowel hanging from his belt with unnatural weight. He knew what would happen if they tried to excavate the bunker again. The earth would resist them. The dead had claimed that ground. Near midnight, the rain stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Billy heard it, rhythmic scraping beneath the floorboards. Not rats or water, but deliberate digging. Metal against earth. No one else stirred as he slipped from his bunk, drawn by the sound. Lifting a loose board, he peered into the darkness below. 2 pinpricks of reflected light stared back, eyes watching from below, patient and expectant. "Not yet," Billy whispered. The eyes blinked once, then receded. The digging resumed, more distant now, following the front line, mapping it from below. Dawn revealed the battlefield transformed, familiar landmarks obliterated. Billy volunteered for a scouting patrol. Hayes hesitated, studying Billy with new wariness. "Stay within visual range," he ordered. "No heroics." The ground felt different under Billy's boots. Not passive mud, but something almost responsive, yielding then pressing back, as if recognizing his tread. He located the approximate position of the bunker under a fresh crater filled with rainwater, the color of weak tea. As he approached, ripples disturbed the surface from within. Billy knelt at the edge. The water stilled, then bubbled as a hand broke the surface, palm up, offering something. A small object rose from the depths, held aloft by unnaturally steady fingers. His compass, standard military issue, but unmistakably his. Taking it, Billy wiped away mud to reveal its face. The needle spun, then stopped, pointing not north, but directly toward the Australian dead, still lying in no man's land. "I understand," he whispered. The hand formed a military salute, then sank without a ripple. When Billy returned to report, he said nothing of what he'd seen. Instead, he packed his few belongings, including the compass that now pointed unerringly toward the nearest, unrecovered dead, regardless of direction. "Medical officer's been delayed," Hayes informed him, not looking up from his maps. "Rail line destroyed. Replacements arrive tomorrow." Billy nodded absently, watching his compass needle track something moving beneath the earth, circling their position. Private Wilson approached, offering tea. "You look haunted, Boxman," he said. "Get some rest." "I'll be fine," Billy replied. "Just need some air." As darkness fell, an eerie calm settled over no man's land. Billy volunteered for first watch, positioning himself at the foremost listening post. From this vantage, he could see the moonlit expanse where so many Australians had fallen. His compass needle quivered with anticipation. Behind him, Hayes addressed the unit. "Replacements arriving tomorrow. We hold position one more night." One more night. Billy's hand closed around the undertaker's trowel as he gazed out at the battlefield. The dead wouldn't wait that long. They had already begun their advance, not above ground, but below it, tunneling through the mud with patient, meticulous purpose. And he, their newly appointed officer, would meet them when they arrived. Midnight at the front. Clouds obscured the moon, casting no man's land into perfect darkness. Billy stood at his post, outwardly alert, but his attention fixed on the compass in his palm. The needle had stopped its erratic spinning, now pointing steadily forward, toward enemy lines, toward the unrecovered dead. A low rumble vibrated through the earth, not artillery, but something moving below. The sound reminded Billy of coffins being lowered into graves, a settling of soil, an acceptance of weight. Hayes appeared beside him, rifle in hand, eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Anything?" "Nothing visible, sir," Billy replied truthfully. "Intelligence reported movement, but we've seen nothing." Hayes scanned the darkness. "Listen for tunnel work. Might be mining operations." Hayes studied Billy's face in the dim light of a shielded lantern. "You've changed, Corbett, since the bunker." Billy didn't respond, fingers tightening around the compass. The medical officer will want to speak with you, Hayes continued. You spent the most time there. They weren't just bodies, sir, Billy said quietly. What? They were sentries, still on duty. The ground beneath their feet shuddered, not distant concussion, but localized tremor, as if the earth itself were inhaling. Alarmed voices called out from down the trench. Check it, Hayes ordered, moving toward the commotion. Alone, Billy felt the compass grow warm. The needle now spun rapidly, unable to fix on a single point. The dead were no longer advancing. They had arrived. A persistent scratching sound drew his attention to the trench floor. The duckboards began to shift, dirt pushing up through cracks. Then another sound, and another, multiplying along the line. Contact! Someone shouted, not from enemy lines, but within their own trench. Private Wilson stood frozen, staring at a hand emerging from the mud wall. A hand wearing an Australian uniform cuff, fingers moving with deliberate precision. Chaos erupted as more appendages appeared, hands, arms, occasional faces pressing against trench walls before withdrawing. Men fired blindly into the mud, bullets having no effect. Hayes rushed back, face ashen in intermittent flare light. Fall back to the second line, he shouted. Something's broken through beneath us. The unit retreated in disarray, all except Billy, who remained at his post. Hayes grabbed his shoulder. That's an order, Corbett. Fall back. Billy turned, unnaturally calm amid the panic. I can't, sir. I've been relieved. What are you talking about? My post has been covered, Billy explained, gesturing to the emerging figures. They've come to relieve us. Hayes backed away, understanding dawning in his eyes. He turned and ran after his retreating men. Alone now, Billy watched as the dead of Fromelles emerged fully, Australian soldiers moving with perfect military discipline despite their decay. They filled the trench in silent ranks, taking positions along the fire step. Among them, he recognized Cooper and Denham, uniforms caked with mud, but posture impeccable. From the enemy side, a matching procession emerged, the dead of both armies united in their underground harvest. The 7 soldiers from the bunker appeared last, led by their officer, who approached Billy with a formal salute. Billy returned it, feeling profound rightness. The officer extended his hand, offering a gas mask, not standard issue, but specialized for chemical preservation. In that moment, Billy made his choice. As artillery began to fall again, the living armies resuming their struggle, he accepted the mask. Behind them, the entrance to the bunker had reappeared, exposed by shifting earth. Inside, 7 chairs waited, one now empty. I'll keep them off the wire, Billy said, the oath feeling sacred on his lips. He descended the ladder one deliberate step at a time. At the bottom, he took his place among them, sitting upright with military precision, the mask hanging loosely from one hand. His other hand held his journal, its pages now filled with names, a meticulous record of every soldier claimed by Fromelles' mud. As the hatch closed, sealing them in perfect stillness, Billy finally understood. The dead of Fromelles had never truly fallen. They had been planted, and now they were growing, standing to attention, waiting for orders that transcended the petty commands of living officers. Billy opened his eyes in the darkness, feeling the earth above settling. His lips cracked into a faint smile as he began his vigil. In 2008, nearly a century after the battle, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave near Pheasant Wood containing 250 Australian soldiers from Fromelles. Among the artifacts recovered was a leather journal, its pages filled with names in different handwritings. The final entry read simply, "Relief arrived. The watch continues." If the mud of Fromelles has seeped into your thoughts, it may be calling you to join our ranks. Check your boots tonight. If you find soil you can't explain, the War Maestro's archive is already claiming you. Subscribe now to unearth more buried horrors from history's battlefields. Press that notification bell. Some watches must never be abandoned, and you'll want to know when our next forgotten file surfaces. Remember, not all sentries have been properly relieved, and the harvest continues.